Emma Carter woke with a start, the kind of jolt that leaves your heart hammering before your mind catches up. The air felt heavier than it should. Her bedroom was dim, just the faint orange hue of the street lamp filtering through the blinds. Only it flickered strangely, like a pulse. She sniffed once, then again. Slower. Smoke. Faint, but undeniable, curling into her senses and pushing adrenaline into her veins. She sat up, listening. The usual chorus of crickets and rustling pines outside was gone, swallowed by a strange stillness. And then, clear as if someone was standing at the foot of her bed, a woman's voice called her name. Emma. Her breath caught. It wasn't a shout, not even urgent. It was low, calm, but threaded with something that made her skin prickle. She swung her legs off the bed, bare feet hitting the cool hardwood. "Who's there?" she whispered, though she already knew it was absurd to expect an answer. The voice had come from outside, she was sure of it. She padded toward the hallway, past Lily's half-open door. The little girl was sprawled sideways across her bed, one tiny arm dangling, her curls a dark tangle on the pillow. For a moment, Emma thought about letting her sleep just a little longer. Then the voice came again, louder this time, and her chest tightened. "It's Maria." Her hand froze on the doorframe. She knew no Maria. None alive, anyway. The name lingered in her mind like a fragment of a dream she'd once had, but couldn't place. She stepped into Lily's room, shaking her shoulder gently. "Baby, wake up." Lily stirred, groggy. "Mommy, it's still night." "I know, sweetheart. We have to go." Emma's voice was steady, though her pulse was racing. By the time she reached the front door with Lily in her arms, the smell of smoke was stronger, acrid, making her eyes sting. She flipped the deadbolt and pulled the door open. Heat met her face like a wall. In the distance, past the tree line, a thick column of orange fire was clawing into the sky. Embers floated on the wind, tiny sparks dancing in the darkness. Somewhere in the roar, the voice threaded through again, Maria, insistent now. She couldn't see anyone, but she felt watched, guided almost, as if the voice was pulling her forward. "Who are you?" she whispered into the smoky air. No answer. Just the rumble of fire and the rustle of pine branches shaking in the hot wind. She dashed to her car, buckled Lily in with trembling hands. The child was more awake now, sensing her mother's fear. "Is it bad, Mommy?" Emma forced a smile that felt paper-thin. "We're just going somewhere safe." She started the engine, the headlights catching the pale dust already swirling on the road. In her rearview mirror, she saw the first glow of flames licking the ridge beyond her neighborhood. As she drove, her thoughts kept circling the voice. If it hadn't woken her, how much longer would she have slept? Would she have noticed the fire before it was too late? And why the name Maria? Halfway down the hill, she passed two of her neighbors out on their porch, pointing toward the fire. She slowed just enough to yell, "It's moving fast, get out!" They waved her on, urgency dawning on their faces. The evacuation route took her through the edge of town. People were spilling into the streets, loading pets into cars, clutching bags and boxes. Sirens wailed somewhere ahead, a fractured chorus against the steady roar of flames in the distance. Only when she reached the open stretch of highway leading away from town did her breathing ease. She glanced at Lily, who had dozed off again, thumb tucked under her chin. For a moment, the relief was enough to quiet everything else. Then, faint but unmistakable, the voice slipped into her ear once more. "Emma." She gripped the wheel harder. "Before I tell you what happened next, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss stories like this." Her hands were damp against the steering wheel. Whoever Maria was, she had pulled Emma from sleep, through the smoke, and out of the house just in time. And somehow Emma knew this was only the beginning. Part A2. By the time Emma reached the high school gym, the parking lot was already a maze of vehicles. Pickup trucks piled high with hastily packed belongings, minivans full of wide-eyed children clutching stuffed animals, and sedans with their trunks ajar, spilling blankets and clothing. The gym's fluorescent lights glared down on rows of cots, tables stacked with bottled water, and boxes of donated clothes. The air was thick with the mingled scents of sweat, instant coffee, and the faint lingering tang of smoke carried in on people's clothes. Emma carried Lily on her hip, as she signed their names at the check-in table. The volunteer, a grey-haired woman with a clipboard, gave her a weary but kind smile. "Bathrooms through there. Food tables at the far end. You two need blankets?" "Yes, please," Emma said. The woman handed her 2 folded fleece blankets, and she made her way toward an empty cot near the wall. Lily clung to her, still groggy, mumbling, "I want my bunny." Emma winced. Bunny was in her bedroom, left behind with everything else. "We'll find you another one," she murmured, kissing her daughter's hair. She tried to keep her voice light, but her mind kept circling back to what she'd left in the house. Not just clothes or furniture, but her grandmother's old photo album, the one with the brittle pages and sepia portraits. She'd meant to grab it one day, to show Lily where she came from. Now it might be gone forever. A man's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Emma Carter." She turned to see Deputy Mark Rivera striding toward her. He was tall, in his 40s, with a uniform still dusted in pale ash. His expression was calm, but sharp, like he was always measuring more than he let on. "Yes?" she asked. "I was checking names against the list of residents evacuated from Pine Hollow Road. You made it out okay?" His gaze dropped briefly to Lily. "We're fine," Emma said. "Shaken, but fine." "Good. Listen, there's a lot of talk going around. Some folks are saying they heard strange things before they left their houses. You mentioned something to the volunteer when you checked in." Emma hesitated. Part of her wanted to brush it off as stress or a dream. But the memory of that voice, its clarity, the way it cut through the roar of the fire was too vivid. "I heard someone call my name, twice. Then they said, 'It's Maria.' I don't know anyone named Maria, not anymore." Rivera's brows lifted slightly. "Not anymore. My grandmother's name was Maria Carter. She died, a long time ago, in a fire." The deputy nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing with thought. "Huh. Well, I'm not here to tell you what you did or didn't hear. Just, fires do strange things to people. Stress, adrenaline, but I'll keep it in mind." She almost asked him what he meant, but just then the gym doors opened and a wave of murmurs swept through the evacuees. A firefighter in soot-streaked gear walked in, speaking quietly with a shelter coordinator. Emma caught fragments. Structures lost, still advancing. High winds. Her stomach twisted. Later, after Lily had finally drifted into a restless sleep on the cot, Emma sat at one of the folding tables, sipping from a styrofoam cup of weak coffee. Around her, conversations rose and fell like low waves, people listing what they'd left behind, guessing which streets had burned, sharing rumors. Twice she heard others mention hearing voices. One man swore he'd heard his late wife calling him from the yard. Another said a woman's voice had told him to take the back road instead of the main one, and when he did, he'd avoided a traffic jam that later became engulfed in flames. Emma listened without joining in, her thoughts spinning. She wasn't the only one. That meant something, though she didn't yet know what. But the name was still hers alone. When Rivera passed by again, she caught his eye. "Deputy," she said softly, "if you find anything about voices or Maria, will you tell me?" His answer was simple, but his gaze was steady. "Yeah, Emma, I'll tell you." Morning light seeped through the high school gym's tall windows, pale and thin against the lingering smell of smoke clinging to everyone's clothes. Emma woke stiff from the cot, her back aching from the unfamiliar mattress. Lily was curled under the fleece blanket beside her, thumb tucked against her cheek. For a moment Emma just watched her sleep, letting that small comfort keep her grounded. But the quiet didn't last. People were stirring, talking in low voices, lining up for the breakfast table. The news was worse now. Whole streets gone, houses reduced to blackened frames. Emma's own neighborhood was mentioned more than once. Her chest tightened every time she overheard it. Deputy Rivera arrived mid-morning, not in uniform this time, but in jeans and a sheriff's department jacket. He carried a folder under his arm. When he spotted Emma, he walked over with that same measured calm she'd noticed before. "Morning," he said. "Got a minute?" Emma nodded, slipping away from Lily without waking her. They stepped into the hallway outside the gym, where it was quieter except for the hum of vending machines. "I checked some old records," Rivera began, opening the folder. "You said your grandmother was Maria Carter. Died in a fire at the same address you lived at?" "Yes," Emma said. "I was 12. It was a small kitchen fire, or that's what I was told. She didn't make it out." Rivera handed her a photocopy of an incident report. "Official cause was grease flare-up on the stove. But there's something in the witness notes. Here." He tapped a section written in looping handwriting. Emma read aloud, her voice low. "Victim was last seen speaking aloud as if to another person. Witness could not see anyone else in the room. Words unclear except possibly a name." She looked up. "So?" "That's what caught my attention," Rivera said. "The witness was your neighbor back then, a Mrs. Halloran. She told the responding firefighter she thought Maria was talking to a woman's voice before the smoke got bad. Said she couldn't hear the other side, but Maria was answering." Emma's throat tightened. She hadn't known any of this. Back then, her mother had avoided every detail, shutting down conversations the moment they drifted toward that night. "I don't know what you're getting at," Emma said, but her tone lacked conviction. Rivera shrugged. "I'm not saying anything for sure, just seems strange you'd hear the same name in the middle of another fire." Emma folded the paper, tucking it under her arm like it might burn her fingers if she held it too long. "My mum never told me this." "Maybe she didn't want you carrying it around," Rivera said, "or maybe she didn't think it mattered." Before she could answer, Lily's small voice called from the gym, "Mommy?" Emma turned to see her daughter rubbing her eyes, blanket trailing on the floor. "I should get back," Emma said. "Thanks for showing me." Rivera gave a short nod. "I'll keep digging. If anything else turns up, you'll be the first to know." Back at the cot, Emma settled beside Lily, who leaned against her. "Did you find food?" Lily asked. "Not yet," Emma said softly. Her mind was still on the report, on that line about her grandmother speaking to someone unseen. The thought sent a ripple of unease through her. She wanted to believe it was just coincidence, that the stress of the fire had made her mind connect dots that didn't belong together. But the memory of that voice, clear, female, saying her name, refused to fade. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Volunteers handed out oatmeal in paper bowls, children played tag in the open space between cots, and someone set up a donated TV to play cartoons. But every so often, Emma caught herself glancing toward the gym doors, half expecting the voice to come drifting through again. It didn't, and somehow that was almost worse. By the second day in the shelter, the shock had worn into a dull, heavy fatigue that clung to everyone like the smell of smoke. Conversations drifted toward practical matters, insurance claims, where to stay once the shelter closed, which roads were still blocked. Emma kept mostly to herself, focusing on Lily, but her eyes roamed the room, noting familiar faces she hadn't seen in years. Late that afternoon the doors opened, letting in a gust of cool air and the sound of boots on tile. Emma glanced up and froze. A tall woman in firefighter gear was stripping off her helmet, revealing sweat-plastered blonde hair and a grin that carried years of unspoken history. "Rachel," Emma said, almost disbelieving. Rachel Harper looked up, recognition flashing in her eyes. "Emma Carter, as I live and breathe." She crossed the room in long strides, embracing her before Emma could respond. The smell of smoke clung to her uniform, mingled with the sharper tang of fire retardant. "It's been forever," Rachel said, stepping back. "What, 8 years?" "More like 10, Emma said with a small smile. "Last time I saw you, you were headed to Sacramento for training." "Guess I never left the fire line," Rachel said. She glanced down at Lily, who was peeking shyly from behind Emma's leg. "And you have a mini you. Hi there." "This is Lily," Emma said. "Lily, this is my old friend Rachel. We grew up together." Lily offered a tiny wave before retreating behind her mother again. They found 2 folding chairs near the far wall. As they sat, Rachel's expression sobered. "I heard your place was right in the path," Emma nodded. "Gone, I think, haven't been back." Rachel hesitated, then leaned in. "Look, I don't want to freak you out, but I heard something the other night. When we were working the line near Pine Hollow, there was a woman's voice in the smoke, not shouting, not panicked, just telling me to turn left when I was searching a structure. Emma's breath caught. Did you see anyone? No one. Building was empty, but when I followed the voice, I ended up finding a man unconscious in the next room. If I'd gone the other way, I'd have missed him. Emma's pulse quickened. You're serious? Rachel nodded. I've heard stuff before in fires, most of us have, but usually it's just your brain playing tricks when you're stressed and overheated. This felt different, clearer, like it knew where I needed to go. Emma thought of Maria, of the way her own voice in the night had been so certain, pulling her toward the door. She swallowed. I heard someone too. She said my name. Then, it's Maria. That was my grandmother's name. Rachel's eyes softened. I remember Maria. She was kind, always made us cookies when we were kids. Emma gave a faint smile at the memory, then let it fade. She died in a fire. Same house. Deputy Rivera showed me the report. She was talking to someone no one else could see. They sat in silence for a moment, the noise of the shelter fading into the background. Rachel finally said, I don't know what it means, Em, but I do know this. Sometimes you get warnings you can't explain, and if I were you, I'd listen next time. Emma wanted to say she already planned to, but the truth was more complicated. The voice scared her as much as it comforted her. It made her wonder if she was imagining things, or if something she couldn't name had stepped in to keep her alive. When a volunteer announced dinner was ready, Rachel stood, patting her on the shoulder. Come on, let's eat before the chili's gone. Emma rose, feeling the weight of Rachel's words settle deep inside her. In a town like theirs, where everyone knew everyone else's stories, some things were still whispered only between the people who'd lived them. 2 days later, the evacuation order for part of Pine Hollow was lifted. Not everywhere, some streets were still too dangerous, but Emma's road was marked restricted access, which meant she could return briefly with permission. Deputy Rivera was stationed at the checkpoint, clipboard in hand. You sure you want to see it? He asked as she rolled down her car window. Emma nodded, gripping the steering wheel. I need to. He handed her a laminated pass. You've got 30 minutes. Watch your step. There's still hot spots. Lily was with a volunteer at the shelter, coloring at a table. Emma didn't want her to see what they might find. The drive back felt longer than it had any right to, each familiar bend in the road feeling foreign under the grey haze that still clung to the hills. When she turned onto her street, her breath caught. The air was quieter here, no sirens, no shouts, just the faint hiss of smouldering debris and the occasional groan of weakened beams settling. The scent was sharp and metallic, undercut by the bitter ash. Her house, or what had been her house, was reduced to a skeleton. Charred studs jutted into the air like the ribs of some great, burned-out creature. The front steps led to nowhere. She stepped out of the car, her boots crunching on a layer of ash so fine it puffed up with each step. Here and there, bits of color stood out against the black and gray, the warped frame of a picture, a melted glass bottle, the rusted curl of a bed spring. Emma picked her way through the remains, heart hammering. She knew she had no reason to expect to find anything intact, yet she still scanned every inch like a detective searching for clues. Her gaze caught on a small glint in the debris by what used to be the living room. She knelt, brushing ash away with careful fingers. A locket, tarnished but unmistakable, her grandmother's locket. The same one she remembered from childhood, a simple oval on a delicate chain, always warm against Maria's skin when she leaned in for a hug. The clasp still worked, and when Emma clicked it open, the tiny black and white photograph inside was untouched. Maria's face looked out at her, serene and strong. It was warm in her hand, as if it had been lying in the sun, though the morning air was cool. Emma closed her fingers around it, the metal pressing into her palm. She had no idea how it had survived when everything else was gone. Behind her a voice broke the silence. You okay? Rivera stood at the edge of the ruins, watching her. She straightened, slipping the locket into her pocket. I found this. It shouldn't be here. Not like this. He stepped closer, glancing down at the spot. Miracles happen in fires sometimes. Stuff that should be gone ends up untouched. But, he added, meeting her eyes, this one seems personal. Emma nodded faintly. She didn't want to explain the heat she'd felt when she picked it up, or the way it felt less like an object and more like a message. They walked the perimeter together, Rivera pointing out areas still too unstable to enter. At the corner of the property, Emma paused, her gaze drawn to the blackened stump of the old pine tree. As a kid, she'd sat beneath it for hours while Maria told her stories, some family history, some pure imagination. Now it was gone. But standing there, Emma swore she heard a faint rustle like fabric brushing past her ear. She turned quickly, but no one was there. Time was nearly up. As she walked back to the car, the locket felt heavier in her pocket, as though it carried the weight of something more than memory. She didn't know what Maria's voice had meant the night of the fire. But holding the one thing that had survived, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that her grandmother was still trying to reach her. Back at the shelter, Emma sat at one of the folding tables, the locket resting in her open palm. Its metal surface had cooled since she'd picked it up, but she still felt an odd weight to it, like it carried something unseen. Lily sat beside her, drawing shapes on a scrap of paper with a borrowed marker, humming softly to herself. Rivera dropped into the chair across from them, setting down 2 paper cups of coffee. "I've been doing more digging," he said. "Not about the fire, about your grandmother." Emma's fingers curled over the locket. "What did you find?" She wasn't just a nurse like most people thought. "I found some old records from the county archives, birth certificates, midwife logs, even a few handwritten letters. She delivered babies all over this region, especially in the smaller, more remote communities. Folks trusted her. Some of the letters mention unusual things." Emma frowned. "What kind of unusual?" Rivera slid one of the photocopied letters toward her. It was dated 1978, written in faded blue ink. "Dear Maria," Emma read aloud, "thank you for staying with me through the storm. I don't know how you knew the flood was coming, but if you hadn't told me to get out, I might not be here to write this." She looked up. "Flood?" He nodded. There was a flash flood that year in Clear Creek. No official warning was given until it was too late for most people. Somehow Maria showed up at this woman's house before it hit. Emma leaned back, her mind racing. "Are you saying my grandmother could tell when something bad was going to happen?" "I'm saying people thought she could," Rivera replied. "A few more letters mention her hearing voices, not in a she's losing her mind way, more like she was tuned into something." Emma stared at the locket. "My mom never told me any of this." "Maybe she didn't want you tangled in it," Rivera said. "Or maybe she didn't believe it herself." That evening, Emma called her mother. The connection crackled, her voice faint through the line. Janet Carter had been staying with a friend in another county since the evacuation. "Mom," Emma began, "did Grandma ever talk about hearing voices or knowing when something bad would happen?" There was a long pause on the other end, the kind that made Emma picture her mother pressing a hand to her forehead, weighing what to say. "Why are you asking me this?" "Because I heard her," Emma said simply, "during the fire. She said my name. She said, 'It's Maria.'" Another pause, then a sigh. "Your grandmother. She believed someone saved her once. Before you were born, during that flood, she told me a woman's voice told her to get to higher ground. She swore it wasn't just instinct, said she'd been hearing the same voice since she was a girl. She never called it anything supernatural, but she believed." Emma's heart thudded. "And you didn't think I should know?" "I didn't want you chasing ghosts," Janet said, her voice sharpening. "Life's hard enough without thinking the dead are talking to you." Emma bit back the retort that rose to her lips. Instead, she said, "She died in a fire, Mom, and now I've heard her in one. Doesn't that mean something?" Her mother's voice softened. "It means you loved her, and maybe that love stays with you in ways you can't explain. But be careful, Emma, don't let it pull you under." They hung up, but the conversation left Emma restless. That night, lying on the cot beside Lily, she ran her thumb over the locket's smooth surface. She didn't know whether Maria's voice was a gift, a warning, or something in between. But she couldn't deny it anymore. It was real, and it had saved her life. The wind picked up that night, rattling the old gym windows and carrying with it the faint smell of smoke from somewhere far off. Most evacuees were asleep, their breathing a low, collective hum under the distant sound of the wind's whine. Emma lay awake on her cot, eyes fixed on the shadowy ceiling, the locket warm against her collarbone. It had been 2 days since she'd spoken to her mother, but the conversation still echoed in her head. Janet's warning, "Don't let it pull you under," felt less like caution and more like a challenge. She didn't want to lose herself in the mystery of Maria's voice, but ignoring it felt impossible. Sometime after midnight, a new sound threaded through the gusts. A whisper so faint she thought at first it was just the wind shifting, but then it came again, curling into her ear like a secret meant only for her. "Emma." She sat up, heart pounding. Around her, people slept undisturbed. The whisper came again, this time clearer, shaped into words. "They're out there." Emma's breath caught. "Who?" she whispered before she could stop herself. No answer, only the sound of the wind filling the silence again. She wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders, scanning the dim room. Lily stirred in her sleep, but didn't wake. Emma slipped her feet into her shoes and rose quietly, careful not to wake anyone, and moved toward the gym's side doors. The moment she stepped into the hallway, the voice returned, still faint but unmistakable. Near the trees, her pulse quickened. The shelter sat at the edge of the high school sports field, with a line of pine and cedar trees marking the boundary, before the road curved away into darkness. She pushed the door open and stepped outside. The air was cool, the night sky washed pale by the glow of distant fire still smoldering beyond the ridge. She walked toward the tree line, her breath coming faster with each step. The whisper guided her like an invisible thread, always just ahead. As she drew closer, she heard something else, an irregular rustle like someone moving clumsily through dry leaves. "Hello," she called softly. The rustling stopped. Then, from the shadows, a small figure emerged, a boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, in pajamas and bare feet. His hair was matted, his cheeks streaked with soot. He blinked up at her in confusion, shivering. Emma dropped to her knees. "Hey, you're okay. What's your name?" "Caleb," he said in a small voice. "Where's your family, Caleb?" I don't know. I woke up and couldn't find them. I thought I saw my mom outside, so I followed her, but then—" His voice trailed off, eyes darting toward the dark beyond the trees. Emma's stomach tightened. "Come on, let's get you inside." She took his cold hand and led him back toward the gym, glancing over her shoulder. The wind still moved through the trees, but the whisper was gone, replaced by the distant echo of her own footsteps. When they reached the door, a shelter volunteer gasped, "Oh my God, where did you find him? We've been looking everywhere." "He was outside, near the trees," Emma said, ushering Caleb in. "He thought he saw his mum." The volunteer wrapped the boy in a blanket, calling for the coordinator over the intercom. Within minutes, his frantic parents arrived, tears streaming as they pulled him into their arms. Rivera, who had been on duty nearby, came over to Emma. "How did you know he was out there?" She hesitated, then said, "I just had a feeling." His eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't press. Instead, he nodded once. "Good thing you did." Emma returned to her cot, heart still racing. The voice hadn't told her why the boy was there, or what might have happened if she hadn't found him. But she knew one thing. Maria, or whatever force this was, wasn't done with her yet. Morning brought the usual noise of the shelter, people shuffling in line for coffee, children chasing each other between cots, the occasional burst of laughter that felt almost foreign after so many tense days. But for Caleb's parents, it was a morning of clinging embraces and whispered gratitude. Emma caught sight of them sitting together at one of the tables, Caleb in the middle, eating toast as though nothing unusual had happened. His mother met Emma's eyes across the room, mouthing a silent thank you. Emma offered a small nod in return, though the truth was more complicated. Thanking her meant acknowledging something Emma couldn't explain without sounding unhinged. Rivera approached with a cup of coffee in one hand and a notebook in the other. "You free for a second?" She joined him at an empty table. He flipped the notebook open to a page with a rough map of the shelter grounds. "I talked to Caleb's parents. They said they both fell asleep around midnight, woke up to find him gone. He must have been outside for over an hour before you found him." Emma sipped her coffee, saying nothing. He studied her for a moment. "When you told me you had a feeling, was that the same as the night of the fire?" Her fingers tightened around the paper cup. "Yes, it was her again." "Maria," Emma nodded. "She told me they're out there and near the trees. That's all. I followed it, and there he was." Rivera exhaled slowly, leaning back. "Emma, I'm not going to tell you what to believe, but I've been on the job long enough to know coincidences don't usually line up this neatly." She gave a faint, humorless laugh. "So what? You think I'm... what? Some kind of medium?" "I think you've got something," he said simply. "And whatever it is, it's keeping people alive." The words should have been reassuring, but instead they sat heavy in her chest. Later that day, she found herself near the sports field again, drawn by the pull of quiet away from the crowd. The trees stood tall and still now, their scent fresh in the cool air, no whisper curling through the branches. She traced her fingers over the locket, wishing she could call Maria's voice at will instead of waiting for it to find her. A shadow fell across the grass, and Emma turned to see Rachel approaching, carrying 2 sandwiches wrapped in foil. "Heard you were the one who found the missing kid," Rachel said, handing her one. "You've been busy." Emma unwrapped the sandwich, grateful for the distraction. "I didn't find him. He was just... there." Rachel gave her a look. "You and I both know that's not how it works. People don't wander around in the middle of the night without reason, and kids that young don't survive it without help." Emma stayed quiet. Rachel sat beside her, lowering her voice. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but I've been in this line of work long enough to know when someone's operating on more than luck. You've got something, Em, and I don't think you can keep pretending it's nothing." Emma's gaze drifted back to the tree line. "I don't even know what it is." "Maybe not," Rachel said, "but you might need it again, and when you do, you'll want to be ready." The rest of the day passed in a blur of small tasks, helping Lily with her coloring, folding donated clothes, avoiding too many questions from curious neighbors. But under it all was the steady hum of something she couldn't name, an awareness that the voice had stepped in twice now, and both times had meant the difference between life and death. That night, lying beside Lily in the dim gym, Emma wondered how many more times it would come, and whether she'd always have the courage to follow it. 3 days after the night she found Caleb, Emma sat with Rivera in the high school library. The shelter volunteers had opened it up for evacuees needing a quieter space, and the scent of old books was a strange comfort amid the lingering smoke that clung to her clothes. Rivera had spread a series of photocopies across the table, old newspaper clippings, handwritten accounts, and yellowed photographs of the town from decades past. "These go back more than 100 years, he said, tapping a clipping dated 1912. "Different families, different disasters, fires, floods, even a mining collapse. But in at least a dozen cases, someone claimed they were warned by a voice before it happened." Emma leaned over the table, scanning the articles. The words blurred slightly, not from poor print, but from the sheer weight of them. "This one," Rivera said, sliding a brittle page toward her, "is from 1948. A woman named Eleanor Briggs swore she heard her sister, who'd been dead for 3 years, telling her to get out of the house. 15 minutes later, lightning hit the roof and set it on fire." Emma felt a chill crawl up her arms. "Are you saying this runs in families?" Rivera hesitated. "That's the thing, it's not always blood relatives. Sometimes it's neighbors, friends, even strangers. But here's the interesting part. Most of the people who heard the voices had a history of surviving something major when they were younger." Emma's mind went to Maria's story, surviving the flood, only to die years later in a fire. "So it's like, once you've been saved, you can save others?" "Maybe," Rivera said. "Or maybe whatever this is, call it instinct, call it supernatural, sticks with certain people. Emma traced a finger over the edges of Maria's locket. If that's true, why me? Why now? Rivera shrugged. Could be coincidence. Could be you were in the right place. Or maybe Maria's voice has been with you longer than you realize, and you just didn't hear it until now. Before she could answer, Rachel appeared in the doorway, helmet under her arm. They're asking for extra hands to sort donations, she said, then glanced at the table. What's all this? History lesson, Rivera replied. Rachel stepped closer, her gaze scanning the papers. I've heard some of these stories. My uncle swore he heard my aunt calling his name the night she died in a car crash. He was still a mile from home. Emma looked at her sharply. Did he believe it was her? Rachel shrugged. Didn't matter. He listened, and it probably saved him from driving into the same floodwater that took her. The three of them sat in a quiet pause, the weight of the conversation hanging in the still library air. Then Rachel straightened. Well, whether it's ghosts or guardian angels, it's real enough to pay attention to. That night, back in the gym, Emma lay awake, replaying the day's conversation. The idea of this being some kind of legacy, passed through survival, through blood or shared experience, made a strange kind of sense, but it also raised questions she couldn't shake. If Maria's voice had saved her, and now she was saving others, what would happen if she ignored it next time? Would it stop coming? Would someone else pay the price? She closed her eyes, the hum of the gym around her fading. Somewhere beyond the walls, the wind shifted, carrying the faintest trace of pine smoke. Her grip on the locket tightened. Maybe Rivera was right. Maybe it had been with her longer than she knew. The next afternoon, a new wildfire flared in the hills east of town. It started small, just a line of smoke on the horizon, but strong winds pushed it toward residential areas faster than anyone expected. By evening, the evacuation sirens wailed again, their rising and falling pitch vibrating through the gym walls. Emma was kneeling by Lily's cot, packing their few belongings into a tote bag, when Rivera appeared in the doorway. His expression was tight. This one's moving fast. They're getting everyone onto buses heading west. How bad? Emma asked, standing. Bad enough, he said. The wind's making it unpredictable. Rachel strode past in full gear, helmet clipped to her belt. We've got spot fires popping up all over. Stay close to Rivera, Em. Emma nodded, guiding Lily toward the exit line forming at the far end of the gym. The crowd's nervous energy was different this time. No shocked stillness, just hurried voices, quick movements, and the sharp smell of fear. They reached the bus staging area just as the wind shifted, sending a visible shiver through the pines. Smoke rolled low over the street, thick enough to sting the eyes. The sound of crackling carried on the gusts, louder than it should have been at this distance. That was when it came, the voice. Emma, don't go yet! She froze on the curb, hand tightening on Lily's shoulder. The line of evacuees moved around them, drivers urging people up the bus steps. Emma? Rivera's voice cut through the noise. She swallowed hard. I think... She lowered her voice. It's her again. His eyes flicked toward the road. What's she saying? That I shouldn't go yet. Rivera's jaw tightened. You sure? She nodded. The voice came again, clearer, carrying urgency without panic. 2 houses down, Chiefs. They can't get out. Emma turned toward the east end of the block, where a row of modest single-story homes sat under a haze of smoke. The second house's porchlight flickered weakly through the murk. She looked at Rivera. She says there's someone in there. He didn't hesitate. Rachel, he shouted. Rachel was at their side in seconds. Rivera pointed. 2 houses down. Possible entrapment. Rachel glanced at Emma. How do you know? I just do. Rachel didn't ask again. She grabbed her radio, relaying the address. Let's go. You're with me. Rivera stayed with Lily while Emma ran with Rachel toward the house. Heat pressed against them as they moved, the air growing thicker with every step. Rachel took the porch first, pounding on the door. Fire department. Anybody inside? A muffled voice answered, hoarse and panicked. Rachel threw her weight against the door until the latch gave. Inside, the smoke was dense but not yet blinding. An elderly couple stood in the hallway, the man leaning heavily on a cane, the woman clutching his arm. Rachel moved fast, guiding the man toward the porch. Emma took the woman's arm, murmuring reassurances. Outside, a fire crew was arriving, hoses uncoiling. The couple was handed off to medics, coughing but alive. Emma stepped back, catching her breath, the heat still licking at her face. She could feel her pulse in her temples, in the grip of her hand around the locket. Rachel looked at her, helmet now on. "You didn't hesitate." Emma shook her head. "Neither did you." They jogged back toward the buses where Rivera stood with Lily, watching anxiously. When they reached him, he looked Emma in the eye. "You trusted it this time." She nodded. "I had to." Rivera's reply was quiet, almost like he was speaking to himself. "That's what makes the difference." The bus engines rumbled, ready to pull away. Emma climbed aboard with Lily, her mind still replaying the sound of Maria's voice, steady, certain, and impossible to ignore. The buses rolled west, headlights cutting through the drifting smoke. Lily leaned against Emma's side, half asleep, while Emma stared out the window at the blurred shapes of houses and trees. She could still feel the pulse of adrenaline from the rescue, her body wound tight even in the relative safety of the bus. Half an hour into the ride, a sudden commotion at the front made everyone turn their heads. The lead bus had stopped, hazard lights blinking in the smoky dark. Word passed down the aisle, road blocked ahead by a downed power pole. The driver called back to the passengers. "Stay seated. We're waiting for the fire crew to clear it." Minutes stretched, each one feeling longer than the last. Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying the faint roar of fire too close for comfort. Then Emma felt it, that unmistakable shift in the air, like the room holding its breath. "Emma, listen to me." She straightened, heart pounding. The voice wasn't distant this time. It was right there, as if Maria sat beside her. "Get off the bus, take the path to your right." Emma glanced toward the window. Through the dim light, she saw the suggestion of a narrow gravel lane breaking away from the main road. "There are two people trapped in the house with the blue porch. You can't wait for the crews, they won't make it in time." Emma's hands went clammy. She turned to Rivera, who was seated a few rows back, watching her closely. She didn't even have to speak for him to know. "Where?" he asked quietly. She pointed. "Blue porch, off that lane." Rivera was already moving, telling the driver to open the doors. Rachel, seated near the front, stood as soon as she heard. "I'm going," she said. Rivera looked at Emma. "You're with us or staying with Lily?" Emma glanced at her sleeping daughter, her chest tightening. Then she leaned down, whispering to Lily as she stirred. "Stay here with Mrs. Talbot, okay? I'll be right back." Lily blinked up at her, still groggy. "Promise?" "I promise." The three of them, Emma, Rivera, Rachel, hit the ground running, gravel crunching under their feet. The lane was barely lit, only the glow of fire on the horizon guiding them. The blue-porched house came into view, smoke already curling from the eaves. Rachel went straight for the door, pounding hard. "Fire department!" A faint shout came from inside, a man's voice coughing. Rachel forced the door open, and heat hit them like a wave. Rivera moved in first, pulling his jacket over his mouth. Emma followed, staying low. In the living room, an older man was trying to help a woman in a wheelchair, but the thick smoke had slowed them to a crawl. Emma rushed to the woman's side, gripping the handles of the chair. "We've got you," she said, voice steady despite the sting in her throat. Rivera took the man's arm, guiding him toward the door while Rachel cleared the way. They burst out onto the porch just as the windows behind them rattled with the heat. Outside, the man collapsed to his knees, coughing hard. The woman clung to Emma's hand. "Thank you," she rasped. Emma didn't know what to say. She only knew that Maria's voice had been clearer this time than it had ever been before. No riddles, no vague directions, just certainty. Rachel gave her a look as they caught their breath. "That's twice in one night. You've been exactly where you needed to be." Emma swallowed, still gripping the wheelchair. "I don't think it's the last time." They helped the couple toward the lane where the bus headlights glowed faintly through the haze. Emma kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see a figure in the doorway, watching them go, but there was only smoke, and the echo of Maria's voice in her ears. By the time they guided the elderly couple back to the buses, the blocked road had been cleared. The drivers wasted no time getting everyone moving again, engines rumbling in unison as they pulled back onto the main route west. Emma settled into her seat beside Lily, who had dozed off again. Across the aisle, Rachel sat with her helmet on her knees, gaze fixed out the window. Rivera was in the seat ahead of them, speaking quietly into his radio. Emma's hands still trembled faintly. She pressed them together in her lap, replaying the moments inside that smoke-filled house, the way the heat had surged against her skin, the weight of the wheelchair handles in her grip, the man's ragged coughing. But more than anything, she replayed the clarity of Maria's voice, the calm certainty that had cut through the chaos. Rivera turned around in his seat, leaning an elbow on the backrest. "You realize," he said quietly, "if we'd waited for the fire crew to reach that lane, those two wouldn't have made it." Emma met his eyes. "I know." "And you still don't doubt it?" She shook her head. "Not anymore." Rachel looked over. "Good, because I've seen a lot of people freeze up in situations like that. You didn't. You listened, you moved, and you saved them. Whatever's going on, it's working." Emma wanted to tell her it didn't feel like her doing any of it, that she was just a pair of hands, following instructions from somewhere she couldn't touch. But instead she said, "It's Maria. She's the one working." Rachel gave a slow nod, accepting that without question. The buses rolled into a smaller town west of the fire zone, where a community center had been turned into a temporary shelter. It was quieter than the gym back home, with fewer evacuees and softer lighting. Volunteers guided people to cots, offered hot soup, and handed out clean clothes. Emma helped Lily get settled, then found herself standing alone near the door, watching as the elderly couple they'd rescued were led to a corner with extra blankets. The woman caught Emma's eye, raising a trembling hand in a small wave. Emma returned it, her throat tightening. Rivera came to stand beside her. "They'll be telling that story for the rest of their lives, you know." Emma managed a faint smile. "I guess so." He glanced down at her locket. "You ever think Maria's voice didn't just save you? Maybe she's trying to teach you." Emma turned that over in her mind. "Teach me what?" "Where to be, how to listen, maybe even how to keep it going after she's gone." Emma didn't answer right away. She thought about how in both rescues she'd felt a moment of absolute trust, a moment where doubt wasn't even an option. It was like standing on solid ground when everything else was giving way. Later, when the shelter quieted for the night, Emma lay awake beside Lily, listening to the muffled sounds of people settling in. She held the locket in her hand, running her thumb over the worn surface. "Maria," she whispered into the dark, "I don't know why you chose me, but if you're not done, I'm here." No answer came. No whisper in the air, no shift in the wind. But for the first time, Emma didn't feel anxious about the silence. She knew it would come again when it was needed. And when it did, she'd be ready. Morning sunlight filtered in through the tall windows of the community center, casting long rectangles of gold across the floor. Emma sat at one of the folding tables with a steaming cup of coffee, watching Lily play a matching card game with another little girl. The quiet was deceptive. The fire still burned miles away, but for now, they were safe. Rivera approached, carrying a thin stack of papers. "I've got something you need to see," he said, sliding into the chair across from her. Emma raised an eyebrow. "What now?" "Your grandmother's last will and testament. I found it in county records. Most of it's just property stuff, but there's a section you might find interesting." He flipped to a photocopied page and pointed at a paragraph in neat typewritten font. Emma read silently, "If anything should happen to me, I leave my keepsake locket to Emma Carter, with the hope that she will understand its importance when the time comes. May she trust her instincts, as they may one day save lives." Her chest tightened. "She left this for me, specifically." Rivera nodded. "It was meant to get to you eventually. Looks like she wanted you to have it not just as jewelry, but as a tool. Emma closed her fingers over the locket at her neck. I wish I could ask her what she meant. That's the thing, Rivera said. I think you already are, and she's answering. Before Emma could respond, her phone buzzed. It was her mother. She hesitated before answering, unsure of which version of the truth she wanted to share. Hi, Mom, she said. Janet's voice was quieter than usual. Rivera called me last night. He told me what you've been doing, saving people. Emma's pulse picked up. I just did what I could. You did more than that, Janet said, and I think it's time you knew something. After the flood, Maria told me she asked the voice why she could hear it. She said the answer was, because you'll need to speak for me one day. She never explained it, but now I wonder if this is what she meant, passing it on to you. Emma leaned back in her chair, the weight of the words settling over her. She knew this would happen. Maybe not exactly, Janet said, but she believed it was possible. And I think she prepared for it. They spoke for a few more minutes, the conversation warmer than their last. When Emma hung up, she found Rivera watching her. Well, he asked, she thinks Maria knew, maybe even planned for me to take over. Rachel arrived just then, her expression weary but determined. Fire's holding for now. Crews think they've stopped it from moving closer. She eyed the papers on the table. What's going on here? Rivera filled her in, and Rachel leaned back with a low whistle. Guess that locket's more than just sentimental. Emma traced the chain around her neck, feeling the subtle warmth against her skin. For the first time, the warmth didn't feel strange. It felt like a quiet reassurance, a steady heartbeat. The rest of the day passed with small tasks, helping sort donated clothes, reading to the kids, listening to snippets of news about the fire lines. But beneath it all was the growing sense that Maria's voice wasn't random. It was part of something bigger, something passed down with intention. That night, as the shelter lights dimmed and Lily curled against her side, Emma whispered, I hear you, Maria. I'm listening. And though there was no audible reply, she felt a deep, calm certainty settle in her chest, as though an answer had been given in silence. By the end of the week, the fire was finally under control. Crews had managed to stop its advance toward the town, and evacuees were slowly allowed to return or make plans for new housing. The relief in the shelter was palpable. Laughter sounded fuller, conversations carried a lighter tone. But for Emma, the change stirred something deeper than relief. She found herself standing outside the community center one cool morning, the sun filtering through the smoke-hazed sky, watching firefighters pack gear into their trucks. Rachel was among them, wiping soot from her face with a rag. You look like you've got something on your mind, Rachel said, walking over. Emma smiled faintly. I think I do. I'm done pretending this is just luck. I've been given something, and I can't keep waiting for it to find me. I need to be ready for it. Rachel tilted her head. What does that mean? It means I want to learn, to do what you do. Search and rescue, emergency response, whatever it takes. If the voice comes again, I don't want to be standing on the sidelines. I want to know how to act without hesitation. Rachel's grin widened. I was hoping you'd say that. We're always looking for volunteers. It's not easy, training's tough and the work's tougher, but you've already got the most important thing. Emma raised an eyebrow. Which is? Instinct, Rachel said simply. Over the next few days, Emma started shadowing Rachel when possible, helping organize equipment, learning basic first aid beyond what she already knew as a nurse, listening to the radio calls and understanding the codes. She practiced handling gear, walking through mock search scenarios in the school's open field with other volunteers. Rivera stopped by one afternoon as she was rolling up fire hoses with Rachel. Looks like you're making it official, he said. Emma nodded, brushing ash off her gloves. If this is what I'm meant to do, I need to be ready for it. You've already saved more people in a week than some do in a year, Rivera said. Training will only make you stronger. That night, Lily climbed onto her lap in the cot, resting her head on Emma's shoulder. Are we going home soon? She asked. Emma hesitated. Not to our old house, sweetheart, but we'll have a new home, and wherever we are, we'll be together. Lily's small fingers found the locket chain, giving it a curious tug. Does Grandma still talk to you? Emma smiled softly. Sometimes, when I really need her. Lily seemed satisfied with that, settling back down. The following morning, Rachel took Emma out to the training grounds just outside town. The place was a mix of open fields and a cluster of small, deliberately damaged buildings used for practice. As Emma climbed through a window frame, pretending to search a smoke-filled room, she realized she felt a new kind of confidence, not just in her abilities, but in trusting the pull inside her when it came. At the end of the exercise, Rachel clapped her on the back. Not bad, Carter. You're quick on your feet and you don't freeze up when you're uncertain. That's rare. Emma caught her breath, glancing toward the horizon where the faintest plume of smoke still lingered from the dying fire. She didn't know when Maria's voice would return, but she knew she'd hear it with sharper clarity now. She was no longer just reacting. She was preparing. And that made all the difference. 2 weeks later, life in the small town was slowly stitching itself back together. Charred hills still marked the horizon, but roads had reopened, businesses were finding their footing again, and the air no longer carried the sharp tang of smoke. Emma was at the new volunteer station, a converted warehouse on the edge of town, helping inventory supplies when the radio crackled to life. Small brush fire reported near Cedar Ridge Road, the dispatcher said. Winds calm, crew en route. Rachel glanced up from her clipboard. That's a low-risk call, but we might get there first if we head out now. Emma grabbed her gear without hesitation. Within minutes, she and Rachel were in the truck, the tires humming against the pavement as they headed towards Cedar Ridge. The fire was small, just a lick of flame against dry grass at the roadside. But as they stopped, Emma froze. The air shifted, subtle, like a change in pressure. And then came the voice. Emma. Inside. Her gaze darted to a modest 2-story house across the road. No smoke, no visible signs of trouble, but the certainty in Maria's tone was unshakable. Rachel, Emma said, already moving toward the front door. There's someone in there. Rachel didn't question it, just followed, calling out, Fire department, as they entered. Inside, the faint scent of something burning reached them, not the wild, open-air smoke of a brush fire, but the acrid smell of electrical wiring. In the kitchen, an outlet near the stove was sparking, the wall around it already blackened. From upstairs came the muffled sound of a child crying. Rachel took the stairs 2 at a time, Emma right behind her. They found a young woman clutching a toddler in a bedroom corner, fear wide in her eyes. It's okay. We've got you, Emma said, stepping forward to take the child while Rachel guided the woman. They moved fast, carrying them down the stairs and out into the fresh air. The relief on the woman's face was almost overwhelming. I didn't even know there was a fire, she said, voice shaking. The smoke alarms didn't go off yet. Rachel called for the incoming crew to handle the electrical hazard, while Emma stood with the rescued family, her heart pounding, not from the danger but from the unmistakable sense of completion. This time, she hadn't hesitated. She hadn't doubted. She had heard Maria's voice, trusted it completely, and acted without fear. Rachel stepped up beside her, helmet tucked under her arm. You're getting good at this, she said with a small smile. Emma glanced at her, a faint grin tugging at her lips. I've had a good teacher. But as they watched the fire crew finish their work, Emma knew the truth. Her real teacher had been there all along. She touched the locket lightly, feeling its familiar warmth. Thanks, Maria, she whispered. Later, back at the station, Rachel replayed the call in her report. You know, she said, most people would call what you've got a gift. Emma thought for a moment, then nodded. It is. But it's also a responsibility. As evening settled over town, Emma returned to the temporary apartment she and Lily now shared. The child was sprawled on the couch, coloring a picture of a fire truck. She looked up as Emma entered. Did you save someone today? Lily asked. Emma smiled softly. Yeah, we did. Before she could say more, she glanced at the camera on the table, her reminder that people were listening now, waiting for more of her story. "If you've been with me through this journey," she said into the lens, voice steady, "subscribe for more stories that stay with you." She reached over to switch the camera off, but paused. "And don't stop here. Click the video on screen to hear another incredible survival story." The locket lay warm against her skin as she shut the light, a quiet promise that the voice would come again when it was needed, and when it did, she would be ready.